Jimmy, when you're ready, we'll get you back up on here, and I might get Daryl to jump up, and maybe Clay, and we'll talk a little bit about the position that James is riding in and how we might change it for some different styles of riding on a bike that looks a bit like this, which could be used. This sort of basic style of frame you might use in a triathlon where you're not allowed to draft. You might use it in a mountain climbing race. You might use a frame that looks a bit like this without the gears on a track. So we might just chat a little bit about that, and while you get on and just turn the legs over there. This is just an interesting one, and I'll be interested about the feedback from these guys on the cadence is a classic one, and there's no question that people pedaling too slowly or pushing too hard a gear too slowly is a classic cause of knee pain or back pain or hamstring pain, tendon overload, and we talked a bit about it last week there. So this was just an interesting one looking at UCI records over the last 50 odd years. And it was interesting to see, and it really quite interesting bunch of guys on there with some different sizes and different weights. But these are effectively the fastest guys in the world over an hour over the last 50 years. And what I found really interesting was their average cadence was 103. And this will be their own chosen cadence, you know, with coaches and that helping out there. So, you know, we classically talk about, from a physio perspective, is making sure that people stay over 80, maybe over 90 there. What do you guys teach?
A lot of your training times you may be looking at your lower 90s to mid 90s for a general speed. If you're talking turning that into a team's pursuit over 4 kilometres, your average cadence for a period of time was about 125. And these days now the gearing's going up, they've got to produce more power on a stronger gear and try and maintain it longer than they previously could. In other words, they ride sub 4 minute times. And that cadence comes down a little bit now, but a lot of the times we're about 125. So again, and you're talking about a number of these athletes too that are in that list, classic road riders who've gone in for the hour record and they've had to go and do it on the track. So I just saw a very interesting study on Miguel and Duran versus Boardman and O'Brien, because they came before Duran came in. And a classic example about bike positioning when they were allowing, you know, now the hour record, they've got to go back to the Merckx effort in Mexico, which is going back to 68 or whatever. Where were we? 72, yeah, when he Ritter did it in 68. But effectively now the official record is back to spoke wheels, standard positioning, etc. But by the time you're talking Moser, for instance, he had the massively oversized rear wheel, all sorts of aerodynamics playing in the game there. But a guy like Indurain, classic road rider, 1.5 Tour de France, he was an amazing weapon of an athlete, phenomenal. But he had to work out through wind tunnel tests and everything else, how can he beat an incredibly marked time of what Boardman and O'Brien, which they were going hand in hand trying to beat that record. And when we come to positioning and flexibility, Indurain was a big unit and tall, and quite inflexible, and he was particularly found it very difficult to get into a low position. So effectively they said, for you to produce at your body mass the power you have to produce, in other words, do the speed you have to go to do that time in, or better that time in an hour, he effectively had to spend 7% more energy because he was 7% less aerodynamic in the bike through wind tunnel tests and all the lead up to how to lead it, than what particularly a Boardman was, because O'Brien was in the experimental positions. He was quite a revolutionary man for anyone who's followed O'Brien's situation. But Boardman was that classic flat back, low position, very aerodynamic, trying to get that maximum speed out of the bike before they were really playing with a lot of power, playing with the speed. So from that point of view, it's interesting, but on the cadence, coming back to the cadence, it's got to work to an individual. So a guy, let's use, you know, you can use a hill climbing example as well. You know, look at the days of, it's bad to use the name Armstrong these days, but when he brought back in to the pedalling with a very high cadence on the hills, back in after when you looked at a couple of Germans and a few others that had got into that big power climb, saying and doing, there was a massive amount of cadence difference if you use that alone. So one theory worked for one person and it worked for that era. Someone else comes along and rewrites the books, you know, and changes the theory. So is this one wrong because now that's right? To me, no. what will ultimately work for that athlete, and again, that will take time to work through it off there. But a lot of the times when you're getting athletes working, you are talking about 90s and then max efforts. In sprinting much higher, but in max efforts you're looking around that 100 to 110 or 102 on the track.
So just let James turn his legs over again, and so once again, we'd probably call this a reasonably conservative road setup position there, where James could potentially be more aggressive than he is there if you want to be more aerodynamic. But what James uses a road bike for a lot is just to get base miles in so he can get onto the time trial bike and ride it fast there. But so the two pictures I put up here are a couple of guys that Clay and Darryl know pretty well. And what I thought I'd do is ask them to show what they do to James's position to put it into a Maya position for riding tour races versus a Chris Hoy position. Now we've got a 60-something kilo guy versus a 95 kilo guy. Someone who can hold 400 or 500 watts for an hour versus someone who can put out 2,500 watts for a few seconds. So very different athletes and with very different goals in life. One who wants to ride 200 metres extremely quickly, one who needs to ride 200 kilometres back-to-back days at a good rate there. So let you guys step in and I'll step out.